Okay, welcome to the session on federal food and ag policy updates. Excited for this session. My name is Roger Cooley with Chicago Food Policy Action Council. I'm going to go ahead and start with the accessibility video, and then we'll move into brief introductions in the presentation.
Hello, and welcome to the 17th Annual Food Justice Summit. My name is Enrique Orozco, and I am one of the co-organizers of the summit this year. Before we start your session, I want to highlight some of the accessibility options, engagement features, and explain how to access interpretation services. Hola, y bienvenido a la 17ª Cumbre Anual de la Justicia Alimentaria de Chicago. Me llamo Enrique Orozco y soy uno de los coordinadores de la cumbre este año. Antes de empezar, quiero tomar un momento para indicar las opciones de accesibilidad, las herramientas de participación y los servicios de interpretación. Para acceder a los servicios de interpretación, fíjese al lado izquierdo de su pantalla. Al hacer clic al botón que dice Audio Captions, se abrirá una ventana. Haga clic en Select y luego elige el lenguaje de su preferencia, inglés o español. Comenzarás automáticamente a escuchar al intérprete. Para acceder a los servicios de subtítulo, elige el botón que indique CC. Se tiene que elegir una de estas opciones. Para escuchar a los presentadores, elige la opción Floor. Se puede cerrar esta ventana. Finalmente, deberás silenciar el video principal para no escuchar a los presentadores e intérpretes. Estas opciones también se pueden encontrar al lado derecho de su pantalla, bajo la pestaña que dice Interpretación. To access interpretation services, look at the left side of your screen. By clicking on the Audio Captions button, you will open a window. Click on Select and then choose which language you would like to hear, English or Spanish. You will automatically begin to hear the interpreter. To turn on closed captioning, click on the CC button. You will need to select one of these options. To hear the original speakers, select the Floor option. You may close this window. Finally, you will need to mute the main video in order to not hear the original speakers and interpreters. These features can also be found on the right side of your screen under the Interpretation tab. The platform also offers a number of visual accessibility tools. To find them, click on the profile image at the bottom of your screen, and then select Accessibility Adjustments. You can also change the language of the window through this pop-up. Under these accessibility adjustments, you can select different options to make the website easier to read. We welcome you to participate in the conversation through the chat window. Clicking again on the Chat tab on the right side will open up this screen. Select the box at the beginning to begin typing into the chat. At the end of the session, we will open for a brief question and answer portion, and you may type your questions here. Afterwards, I invite you to open the polling tab to answer a very short survey that lets our team know how well we did in planning these sessions. I hope you enjoy the 17th Annual Chicago Food Justice Summit. I will now turn it over to your speakers.
Great. Well, I wanted to get our session started. Again, I'm Roger Cooley with the Chicago Food Policy Council. We have some wonderful speakers who are going to share their perspective and experience and give an overview of what the Farm Bill covers, but also what opportunities there will be for influencing the Farm Bill. That it's one of the main, it's the primary source of ag and food system policy that the U.S. government has at the national scale that influences state and local policy in big ways as well. And we'll hear about that from Billy Hackett, who's with NSAC, the National Sustainable Ag Coalition, and Wes King, who is also with the National Sustainable Agriculture Coalition, and Liz Stelk with the Illinois Stewardship Alliance will give some input on how recognizing that policy flows from local to state, the federal reps, and in the Congress, how we can be influential in Illinois as well in that process. So I'm going to hand it over to Billy to get us started. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Roger. Hey there, folks. It's great to be with you. I'm Billy Hackett with the National Sustainable Agriculture Coalition. Thank you for the introduction. Let's get into this presentation about the Farm Bill. Let's learn about it together. Let's discuss some opportunities to engage and what the process is all about. Let's demystify it. First, I'll give you a little bit of background into NSAC, so you know why we're here and why we're talking to you about the Farm Bill. We're a grassroots alliance of over 130 member organizations from around the country, and we work together to improve federal food and farm policy, and we have for over 30 years. There's a long history of how we came to be where we are, but it started with the 1980s farm crisis, farmers coming together to try and address those ills. Uh, NSAC members in Illinois include Illinois Stewardship Alliance, who we have here represented today, and maybe some others in the audience. We have Angelic Organics Learning Center, Association of Illinois Soil and Water Conservation Districts, and Food Animal Concerns Trust, just to name a few. We have many more members throughout the Midwest and through all other regions of the country. We have a multi-tiered system that informs how we function. What we do comes from the ground up. It begins with farmers and stakeholders, of course, folks who live the everyday live and experience on the ground, share those experiences, ideas, and challenges with local groups. And those local groups feed into, or often are, our member organizations who collect that input from farmers and stakeholders and add their own experiences and aggregate observations and bring those together to us at NSAC. At NSAC, we help our members identify top priorities for sustainable food and ag policy, essentially listening to everything that we're hearing going on the ground, needs that are unmet, challenges that need to be overcome. And we translate that into policy, into actionable legislation. And we develop campaigns to win that legislation and to pass it through Congress or to work with federal agencies to implement that legislation. That's the last piece of the puzzle here. We build those relationships and we do that work in Washington, D.C. to make sure that our goals are met and to make sure that our campaigns are won. So before we dive into the Farm Bill, we need to talk a little bit about how the Farm Bill came to be. What's a little bit of the historical context that has shaped American agriculture and continues to shape many of the dynamics that we see in food and farm policy. And that requires an acknowledgement of stolen land and labor. More than 1.5 billion acres of land were taken from indigenous communities in our history. That was done through countless treaties that were broken, promising good relations with natives when in reality we broke those treaties and stole their land. And acts like the Homestead Act of 1862, which guaranteed white landowners about 130 acres of land if they were willing to go out and take it and improve the soil. But the problem is that land was already belonging to people. It belonged to native peoples who were kicked off of the land and everything that that entailed. Uh, there's also stolen labor. We need to look at and acknowledge the enslavement of African people, as well as the Bracero program, which brought Mexicans over during the World War II labor shortage, who were underpaid, if paid at all, and living and working in subpar conditions. Together, these kinds of labor practices and programs disproportionately benefited white, high earning landowners. And it's on these foundations of stolen land and labor that our agriculture system today was built and continues to function. That brings us to the beginnings of the Farm Bill and the New Deal era. So, the New Deal era, as I'm sure you're familiar, was a piece of the puzzle to recover from the Great Depression coming out of World War II. And so that legislation as a whole upheld systemic racism in many ways, including by excluding domestic workers and farm workers from social programs, the National Federal Labor Relations Act, which allows those kinds of workers to organize. Again, domestic workers and farm workers were excluded and continue to be excluded from that kind of legislation, as well as federal minimum wage and the like. And these industries were and continue to be predominantly represented by people of color. And we can look to the Farm Bill as the other piece of this puzzle. The Agricultural Adjustment Act of 1933 is the earliest manifestation of the Farm Bill, or what people acknowledge as such. And since then, local USDA offices have discriminated against farmers when implementing or getting resources to farmers and restricting access to especially Black and Indigenous farmers who are seeking loans and other services. So, again, these are the foundations that our food system is built upon. And those foundations continue to be alive, and it affects access to programs in the Farm Bill as well. So on the screen, you'll see one example of the Conservation Stewardship Program, a flagship conservation program that is authorized and included in the Farm Bill. You can see on this map the acres that are enrolled by socially disadvantaged farmers in the fiscal year 2018. Socially disadvantaged is a term that USDA uses to signify Black, Indigenous, people of color farmers, and depending on the program, veteran farmers, women farmers, and the like. You can see here that a majority of states have 0% of these socially disadvantaged farmers represented through the Conservation Stewardship Program. And those states who do have socially disadvantaged farmers represented are overwhelmingly at very small percentages of total enrollment of the program. And so that's just one concrete example of how socially disadvantaged farmers, BIPOC farmers, continue to be shut out of programmatic benefits through USDA and that are authorized by the Farm Bill. So we're not the first to realize that. We're not the only people working on that. And I'm sure that many of you here today work on this in your own ways and in your communities, doing the work that you do. At the national policy level, we need to change the structure. There have been a number of initial victories, including set-asides for farmers of color in conservation and other programs authorized through the Farm Bill, essentially a pot of money or funds that are exclusively reserved for BIPOC or SDA farmers, socially disadvantaged farmers. We have specific programs meant to serve these farmers. That includes the outreach and assistance for socially disadvantaged and veteran farmers and ranchers, also known as the 2501 program, which funds trusted organizations who are doing technical assistance, outreach, and giving support to these BIPOC or socially disadvantaged farmers on the ground, who are otherwise, again, shut out of many programs and opportunities. And there's nutrition programs and healthy food access programs. You can think of SNAP that guarantee or give BIPOC farmer or people the opportunity to benefit in some way through a system that they're overwhelmingly excluded from. But that's only a bandage, and all of it is just the beginning, right? More structural and fundamental change is needed if we want to shift the narrative from those beginnings of stolen land and stolen labor, just a future of abundance for everyone. Here are a few questions that we think of in our work. What are ways that we are upholding systems of oppression in our own food systems work? What are some resources or skills that my organization or farm has access to? Who do we serve and who do we support with the resources that we have access to? And who's left out? Who doesn't have access to these resources? All questions that we need to ask and more as we look to build policy that is racially equitable and building towards a more just future. And so I've talked a lot about the Farm Bill, the beginnings of the Farm Bill, the fact that it includes a lot of programs to benefit farmers and other folks in the food system. But really, what is it? About every 5 years, Congress develops this massive piece of legislation that we call the Farm Bill, which essentially sets the rules of the road for our nation's food and farm system. The Farm Bill contains policies, programs, and funding. Everything from rules around who is eligible for a farm loan to funding for food assistance for low-income families. The Farm Bill has wide-reaching impact. It impacts what we eat, and by extension, our health, It affects our nation's farmers and their opportunity to create and sustain livelihoods on the farm. It impacts our environment and our natural resources. You can think about the greenhouse gas emissions or our environmental footprint that comes with farming and certain farming practices. And it affects the economy writ large as a major industry and all facets of the food industry, which are connected to the farming itself. What's in the Farm Bill and what does it cost? The 2018 Farm Bill was the last Farm Bill passed, and it was estimated it would cost a total of $428 billion over 5 years. So 2019 to 2023, $325.8 billion. So the 76% of overall Farm Bill funding goes to nutrition programs. So again, think about the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program or SNAP. About 38.5 billion of those dollars, or 9% of total Farm Bill funding, goes towards crop insurance or went towards crop insurance in the previous cycle. That includes price loss coverage program, many multi-peril insurance programs, whole farm revenue, many other types of insurance. There are commodity programs, and that includes ARC and PLC that make up 7% of total Farm Bill spending for $29.6 billion. And conservation programs like the Conservation Stewardship Program, the Conservation Reserve Program, EQIP, and many others that incentivize farmers to adopt conservation practices, made up for 7% of total Farm Bill funding, or a total of $29.6 billion. And there's a 1% of miscellaneous costs, everything from horticulture, forestry, rural development, credit, research, and other kinds of programs that aren't included in those other major buckets. So as you can see, the Farm Bill does many things. So what's the path to a new Farm Bill? Right now, we're in 22, and the next Farm Bill we expect to pass in 2023. Not a promise, but an expectation. Right now in the process, NSAC and our partners are developing the policies we want to see in the Farm Bill. We're developing our priorities, we're brainstorming, we're in that phase where we're working with our members to listen to and identify the challenges that farmers and food system people are facing on the ground. And we're hoping to work with Congress this year to develop bills that will make it into the final Farm Bill, as well as participate in different congressional hearings and opportunities to inform the conversation as Congress begins that discourse. So when it actually comes time to pass the Farm Bill, and this again is the beginning phases where we are, each agriculture committee, and there's an agriculture committee in both the Senate and the House of Representatives, are going to draft, amend, and ultimately vote on their own respective versions of the bill. Each full chamber, after it passes each committee, will debate, amend, and vote on that bill from its respective committee. So, Senate and House Agriculture committees develop their own bills. The Senate and the House each vote on their respective bills. And then leaders from the House and the Senate, including Ag committee chairs from both chambers, meet and form a conference committee where they combine the bills, and the final negotiations happen to develop one product out of both conferences or both chambers. And the full chambers of both the House and the Senate vote on that final confirmed bill. Once that final confirmation and that final vote happens on a combined bill, the Farm Bill is sent to the White House for the president to sign into law. That's the process in a really neat bubble. And so there's a lot of key players engaged, right? Of course, there's the grassroots voices. That's you. And that's the most important, to make sure that what we get into the Farm Bill is what we need and what the moment calls for. But there's also those folks in DC, the Congress and the congressional committees, especially the House Committee on Agriculture, the Senate Committee on Agriculture, Nutrition, and Forestry, the full Congress, so every representative that represents you and the folks across the country, and the president, of course, who will sign that bill into law. And I know that Liz is going to go into more detail about who at the local level is important. NSAC, again, is in the policy development phase right now, but we want to see more support for climate change and conservation programs. We need to meet the moment. Working lands conservation programs. We want to see reform to the farm safety net programs, thinking crop insurance, commodity programs, and credit, which overwhelmingly right now support a very specific conventional industrial model of agriculture. We want to see reforms to beginning and socially disadvantaged farmers to meet needs on the ground. We're looking at how local agricultural marketing programs can be reformed and other local food system programs. We're looking at sustainable and organic agriculture research and trying to get more support for those initiatives, as well as organic transition programs and other barriers organic producers face, and many more priorities. How can you plug into the Farm Bill? There are many opportunities for you to plug into the Farm Bill, and one of them is talking to local groups, including the Illinois Stewardship Alliance that we have here today. Next year, when the Farm Bill is going through Congress, we're going to need your help to make sure Congress knows how important these issues are and that Congress stands up for sustainable ag, local food, and more. And during that phase, but always, it's important to make calls to legislators, set up meetings with legislators, bring legislators face to face with farmers so you can share your stories, tell your stories, and stay connected. And of course, you can sign up for updates through NSAC if you want to be kept into the loop of what we're up to and where in the process we are. And so, like I said a little bit earlier, 2022 is listening sessions, it's hearings, it's developing marker bills or bills that we hope will eventually make its way into the final Farm Bill. And we're hoping to shape what's included in that final 2023 Farm Bill. We're looking and working on cultivating congressional champions who we're going to work with to carry these policies forward and include through Congress in the Farm Bill. And we're looking for your help to make sure that Congress knows how important these issues are. So please do stay in touch with NSAC. Here's some contact information, our Facebook, our Instagram, our Twitter, and our website, which probably has the most helpful information for y'all. And you can also sign up for updates on our blog. And my contact information is here, Billy Hackett, Policy Specialist, as well as my colleague who's with us today, Wes King, a Senior Policy Specialist. And I know there's a lot more to get through today, so you can take me down and looking forward to the panel discussion in a bit.
I was on mute. All right. Hello, my name is Liz Moran-Stelk. I'm the Executive Director of the Illinois Stewardship Alliance. We are proud members of NSAC, and it's Wes and Billy who keep their finger on the pulse of what's happening in DC that helps us and supports our grassroots organizing in Illinois. The Illinois Stewardship Alliance is a powerful alliance of farmers and eaters. Oops. Oh no. Here we go. Let's start again. All right. Thanks for your patience with my tech here. We're a powerful alliance of farmers and eaters who are working together to solve problems in the food system. And many times those problems the solutions that we're bringing forth are policy that we're organizing for. And you can hear later the next section at the summit, my colleagues are going to talk about our state policy agenda. But what we're really excited about and what we organize for all year long is waiting for the 5-year Farm Bill to come up, because this is when our real opportunity to leverage grassroots organizing to hold decision makers accountable at the local level for members of Congress. And it turns out that Illinois is a really important place for the Farm Bill. We have 5 members of Congress who serve on the Congressional Agriculture Committees. So first, our U.S. Senator Durbin, is a member of the Senate Agriculture Committee. So that means that all of us in Illinois, our voices really matter. And because we want to make sure that Senator Durbin is hearing about the issues that matter most to us that we want to see in the Farm Bill. But there's also a number of congressional districts where your voice matters especially. And this is compared to some places in the U.S. where there are no members of Agriculture Committee. And so their influence on the Farm Bill is much less powerful than if you live in one of these districts where we have a member on the Agriculture Committee. So Congressman Rush in Chicago is a member of the Agriculture Committee. Sherry Bustos in the 17th, that's in Western Illinois, Northwestern Illinois. Congressman Rodney Davis in Central Illinois. Congresswoman Mary Miller in Southeastern Illinois is another member. And then we also happen to have a member who serves on the Agriculture Appropriations Committee, and that's Congresswoman Lauren Underwood. So these are really key members of Congress that are going to help write the Farm Bill and who need to hear from Illinoisans, especially those in their district. But because we all live in Illinois, we can all help influence Senator Durbin. So at the Stewardship Alliance, we have a Farm Bill agenda that's, of course, we're part of NSAC's agenda, but we have, and we're working on our own. It's early on in the process, so we're still developing the issues and developing the policy agenda, but this is typically what our Farm Bill agenda is going to look like. So first, we need to have conservation programs to solve Illinois' farm runoff pollution problem. So Illinois is our farms are huge contributors of farm runoff pollution into our waterways. And that water makes its way down to the Gulf of Mexico and has contributed to the largest dead zone that's the size of New Jersey and in the Gulf of Mexico. But that problem isn't just down in the Gulf of Mexico, it's impacting water quality all over Illinois. And so one of the solutions to reducing farm runoff pollution is conservation, sustainable agriculture practices that are put on the land. But those are expensive and difficult to do. And so the Farm Bill has programs that support farmers who are trying to use conservation or sustainable practices on the land to reduce that pollution that's coming off of farms. So that's a really important area where we want to see more support in the Farm Bill. Another, and that's critical and really exciting, is support for the local food infrastructure. So in the last Farm Bill, for the first time, it was became for the local agriculture. Wes can talk more about this because I'm forgetting the name of the program, but local food infrastructure became a permanent part of the last Farm Bill, which recognized for the first time that building local food systems, local and regional food systems, is part of our national farm policy. And that's a really exciting development, but we have to really work to defend and improve that program because it needs more funding and more support so that we can build local and regional food systems in this country. Another is we need crop insurance that works for small and diversified farms. So many of our members across the state are farmers who are smaller, direct market, they have diversified farms. And the crop insurance, there's very little crop insurance that works for them. And so that's another area where they don't enjoy the protections that other farmers who grow commodities can enjoy. And finally, among our top priorities are training support and land access for beginning and socially disadvantaged farmers. This is another area where if advocates at the grassroots level don't hold decision makers accountable, this kind of area can be neglected. And it's really important to do organizing around these programs. So just a little bit about what the timeline is. So right now is when the House and Senate Agriculture Committees are starting to have hearings. And so what we're doing is listening sessions to surface some of the issues that need to be in the next Farm Bill. So that means gathering farmers to talk about the issues, holding listening sessions, and beginning to look at what the issues are for the Farm Bill. Later this spring, the members of Congress will start having field hearings. So that means, we've gone to some that are in big theaters where the members of Congress sit in the front and people can come down and speak. And so those field hearings are going to be starting in the spring and early summer. And marker bills will begin to be introduced. So it's a really important time between now and then to talk to our members of Congress and to develop champions for the kind of bills that we want to see happen. In the summer, there'll be introductions of those bills and early drafting of the Farm Bill. Our friends at NSAC can tell you more about marker bills and what that means, so we can talk more about that in the Q&A. During the fall, that's when we really want to gin up public support for the marker bills. Those are the ideas in the Farm Bill that we really want to see happen. and the Agriculture Committee will start their sort of horse trading, their back and forth on, what's going to be in the next farm bill. And then we anticipate that the first 6 months of 2023 will be when Congress will aim to finish the farm bill. So, and to have a draft that they'll bring up to vote. So this is a bit of the timeline, and you can see there's some urgency to we're right in the middle of it right now. Really important timing to work on the farm bill. So what are the things that the Alliance are doing? So I mentioned right now we're starting with farmer listening sessions. So those are to make sure that we're surfacing what are the real challenges that farmers, especially small and diversified farmers, are facing. Another thing that we're doing in collaboration with NSAC is holding virtual in-district meetings, and those are with those members of Congress who are key on the agriculture committees. And then coming up this summer, we'll have Farm Bill 101 summer shindigs. So we have summer shindigs in those key congressional districts all over the state. And those are open for people to come and learn about the Farm Bill and learn how they can and take action on the Farm Bill. This photo is from a shindig last summer with Congresswoman Underwood. And so we go to a farm, we hang out, and we learn about how to get engaged and take action. This is another photo from another one of the last summer congressional. This was a farmer roundtable with Congressman Rodney Davis there in the center. So that's another thing we'll be doing throughout the August recess is farm tours and farmer roundtables with the members of Congress, and we'll be participating in field hearings. I mentioned those field hearings that will be happening, and we'll be turning people out to talk at those. So if you want to get involved and stay connected to this organizing that's happening right now, I encourage you to join our newsletter list as a start. But what's really important as we're building a grassroots organization to organize and hold decision makers accountable is to become a member of the organization and get involved. And in the meantime, you can also follow us on social media. So I encourage you to go to ilstewards.org/join to be able to get onto our email list. That's the best way to start hearing about what we're organizing on in the Farm Bill. All right. I'm going to stop there. And I want to thank Roger for the opportunity to talk with you guys today.
Great. Well, if folks have any questions, we can pull those from the chat if folks want to add any that they have. And Wes, if you have anything that you wanted to add or supplement at this point too.
No, I was just Marley answered it. Liz was looking for the name of the local food infrastructure and local food support program, and Marley got it in there. The local agriculture marketing program.
Thanks, you.
Marley.
Great. And well, I guess I'll ask this while we're waiting. Knowing that the Farm Bill is coming up, but the USDA has rolled out a lot of new programs this year under Biden's administration that hadn't existed, some trying to be more responsive. Anything that's coming out or is ongoing right now that folks should be paying attention to in advance of the Farm Bill?
I mean, it's Roger. It's a good question, and it like it's sort of like my answer is not a very good specific one, but it's to talk a little bit about some of the dynamics that are going to play around the Farm Bill's development in terms of politics. So we are at this point, unfortunately, planning or bracing ourselves for what will likely be a divided Congress next year. So, the Republicans will control some element of the federal government and therefore will be, have a fair amount of power when it comes to developing the Farm Bill. And as a result, there is not going to be money available to do new things. So one of the things that we're starting to think about here is how do we figure out how to weave together some of this great, like you mentioned, there's a lot of really interesting things that are coming out from the administration, particularly implementing a lot of this funding that was provided as COVID response. So there's this local food purchasing assistance cooperative agreement program that is providing funding to states to try to purchase more food locally and from socially disadvantaged farmers to get to those who are in need across the country. But that's costs money. There's a similar program that's coming down the line to spend a couple $100 million on trying to get more local food into schools by providing funding to states. All these things are really great and they're exciting and they're going to help build, hopefully the kind of partnerships, supply chains, and networks that will continue in the absence of those funding. But one of the things we're like that's going to be a difficult, tightrope to walk is we're hoping these are really successful programs and highlight some really important new directions that we could be taking federal policy to better support community-based food systems that embrace equity. But there's not going to be money in the Farm Bill, especially largely because the Republicans are going to be in control or likely in control of one element. And as anybody who's paid a little bit of attention to politics recently has seen that, it seems like the Republicans, when it's an opportunity to beat up on the Democrats, really go after government spending and we need to address deficits. We've already been hearing the Republican Party, Republican agriculture staffers say, oh, we now have a $1 trillion farm bill, and we're going to have to, basically signaling one of their approaches is going to be trying to cut programs. They've oftentimes tried to cut SNAP. We definitely expect huge efforts from the Republican Party to try to undermine the SNAP program. So there's a lot of exciting things coming out, like you said, and it's going to be really difficult. How do we balance trying to incorporate some of those in under a situation where there's not going to be excess of resources to spend on new programs and new ideas?
Thanks, Wes. Looks like we have a couple. I'm going to start dropping a couple in here.
You want me to take that? So marker bills. Marker bills are let's call them like organizing tools. Marker bills are pieces of legislation that members of Congress will end up introducing into Congress, into the legislative process, with no intention of them ever becoming or passing as standalone legislation. A lot of legislation gets introduced not for the purposes of ever moving through the committee process, but try to I like to say, make a mark on the conversation, put out a set of ideas that people can rally around, and then hopefully that builds enough pressure for those who are writing the actual farm bill to include the content of the marker bill in a farm bill. So marker bills are these kind of organizing vehicles to build support for ideas that we want to see in a final farm bill.
I could take this question on the screen. Any thoughts on essentially making crop insurance into a tool that can incentivize diverse production systems and direct market farmers and work for direct market farmers? So overwhelmingly at the moment, crop insurance is a really complex system, a public-private partnership through which different yield and revenue-based products are offered, but usually per county, per crop, right? And so if you're a farmer who does not grow one of the few major commodities in a commodity growing state, but are a specialty crop farmer or a very diversified farmer, it can be hard to find insurance products available for you in your individual county. If you're growing strawberries in Montana, good luck finding an insurance policy to cover it, right? And so generally. That's the predominant model. There is an insurance product that was included in the 2014 Farm Bill and a predecessor before it that NSAC and our member organizations have been working to uplift and to strengthen as a unique tool to incentivize diversification through crop insurance. It's called whole farm revenue protection. And what it does is instead of insuring one individual crop on your operation, it insures your entire operations revenue. And that includes all products that you are producing, crops and livestock. And that is the only crop insurance policy available nationwide, regardless of what county you're in. And so it's available to every single farmer and has a diversification discount built in. It's a little more complex than it sounds, but the basic premise is the more commodities that you add to your on-farm operation, the lower your premium is to obtain or to buy that insurance. And so that diversification discount is something that we want to see strengthened, right? And whole farm revenue as a whole is a program that we want to see become more accessible and more attractive to farmers wherever they are and whatever they farm, and more attractive for crop insurance agents to sell. That is one dynamic uh, this equation. It is more lucrative for crop insurance providers to sell conventional crop insurance policies based because of the way that compensation rates for crop insurance agents are calculated. Essentially, those policies are quicker to write, and they know how to write a simple corn or bean policy. Whereas whole farm revenue protection can be really complex depending on your operation and how many products you have, et cetera. And so there's resistance from crop insurance agents in many parts of the country to offer it. So those are barriers that we're trying to overcome in a specific tool that we're trying to promote and strengthen to incentivize diversification. And there's a lot of other big picture questions that we're looking at and we're thinking through and have in the past tackled, right? Could crop insurance as a whole be tied to conservation practices, right? Could you be required to adopt certain conservation practices to receive a lower premium for your crop insurance, right? Kind of a stick approach to the situation, or a carrot approach to that same situation. Could the underlying risk rating methodologies, which determine the premium cost for your crop insurance, take into account the benefits or the risk reducing value of your conservation practices? So basically, if you adopt more conservation practices, your farming operation is inherently less risky. So shouldn't your crop insurance cost less? And then another avenue there is providing discounts for certain conservation practices on your crop insurance, right? For example, the pandemic cover crop program that we've seen implemented in the past couple of years. Could that be built upon or expanded to cover not only cover cropping, but other kinds of conservation practices, and essentially provide a menu of options for farmers to choose from based on what practices will work well for your farm in your region. So there's a lot of opportunities to incentivize diversification through crop insurance or otherwise align crop insurance with conservation. And these are all things that we are exploring to include in the next Farm Bill. I'll take this question, and then Wes, if you want to expand upon it, please do. But I think we need to start with process, right? And going back to the Farm Bill, how it's written, what's included in that bill. And the question is about Warnock's bill being included in the Farm Bill. Could it be knocked out if Republicans take control? Right now, there is no Farm Bill, right? There is no, every bill that's introduced is by default going to be included in the Farm Bill. Warnock's bill is a marker bill, right? It's an aspirational piece of legislation that we hope may be included, or some groups hope may be included in the eventual Farm Bill, but isn't there yet. And so to your question, could it be knocked out if Republicans gain control? It certainly may not be included if Republicans do have a role to play, or even conservative Democrats who are opposed to the legislation, right, and its scope. But Wes, I invite you, or Liz, I invite you to jump in if you know more specifics there about the Warnock bill.
I would just encourage it. If Wes, I'm just getting in here. If you could just explain what it is. It's a really important bill, but you haven't named what it does.
Well, I was going to ask, which Warnock bill. That the senator over the last couple of years has introduced a number of pieces of agriculture-focused legislation, and I'm not certain which one we're talking about. And with some more certainty, I could talk a little more about it. Well, let's see, did it?
So,
Okay, so this is what I thought it was referring to. Like I think the reference here is, so one of the things right before, as Warnock was getting elected and Biden was transitioning into becoming president, legislation was introduced to provide debt relief for BIPOC farmers. Is that the bill we're talking about, Erica? So I'm going to assume it is. So this was included in the American Rescue Plan Act, which was passed last March, so about a year ago now. This was the president's signature response to trying to address the pandemic, and it was included as part of that. But as some of you probably know who have been following that, it has been tied up in the courts, and sadly, I would not say the legal prospects for it are looking the best in light of the makeup of the current Supreme Court. So there's a question of like what moves forward with that. The Farm Bill would be an opportunity to amend the underlying legislation, the American Rescue Plan Act, to try to address those legal challenges and try to free that funding up. But if Republicans do control a branch of Congress, that will make changing that in a way to free the funding up a big battle. It doesn't mean it'll ultimately get knocked out. But it is feasible that it could get knocked out, and it is feasible that some sort of compromise may end up surfacing. One of the things that was included in the failed Build Back Better Act, this was the big bill that Congress has been putting together for over 6 months that Joe Manchin kind of tanked. That included changes to that BIPOC debt relief law to make it more race neutral, but targeted in a way to make sure that most BIPOC farmers receive debt relief from it, but done in a way that looked like it was just for all small farmers, but targeted towards BIPOC farmers. That may have some legs in the next farm bill in terms of a compromise between Republicans and Democrats. But it's a real worry or concern in terms of like what happens with this debt relief funding. Can it be unlocked, and can there be compromise or something figured out so that the Republicans aren't able to tank it again?
All right, I think we're gonna do one more, and because we're almost at time. We're at time. Liz, this is kind of directed at you. Let's see if this. You have any thoughts here?
I saw that and I don't. So if the fellows from NSAC have something. And thanks for the question, David.
Well, I can say David Beck, assuming this is David Beck from the Self-Help Credit Union, who is a member of NSAC. We've definitely looked at it, and I think it's definitely something that we should have more conversations with and bring in more NSAC members, because I think as Liz has sort of indicated, she's not familiar specifically with this, but that means I think it is something that would be valuable for NSAC and our members to to continue to look at and look more deeply about how, maybe we can figure out a way to. So the farm credit system is a government sponsored entity, and it actually it's somewhat subsidized by the federal government, but it's the only government sponsored entity like that is subsidized by the federal government that does not have to reinvest any of its profits in community development. And there's been a long-standing discussions going back a couple farm bills about, can there be some sort of reinvestment requirements placed upon the farm credit system, especially in light of things like $6.8 billion in profit, that was net income. So profit for that system. Should we not be, as a government sponsored and subsidized entity, should some of those profits not be reinvested in providing grants to community-based agriculture systems, BIPOC groups, as well as creating new loan and credit products that are super cheap and affordable for higher risk borrowers and things like that.
Great. Well, we're at time. I wanted to say thank you all for our speakers, Billy, Wes, and Liz. Very appreciative. Also want to give thank yous to Barb and Desiree, our ASL translators today. Thank you to the Spanish language translation service providers as well. Please, there's a small poll next to the video window. If you can give feedback to the session, that's very appreciative. Also dropped in, we have beautiful t-shirts that were designed for the summit that are for sale as well. If people are interested, you can follow that to the link. But I think our next set of sessions will start at 2, and then we'll have a final wrap up a little after 3. So again, very appreciative of all your time. And as posted in the chat, we will be downloading these the recordings from the videos and putting them up on YouTube over the next week or so. We'll send an announcement there, so all of this amazing information will be available moving forward. But again, thank you all so much, and have a great rest of your day.
Thank you, everyone. It was a pleasure.
Always great to be here for this conference and summit.